All right, y'all. We are live. Good evening. Good evening. Let's see here. All right. Yep. We are fully set. What's going on, y'all? Dr. Pierre, your board certified internist. Welcome, welcome. Thank you for everyone who is joining. Thank you for everyone who will catch the replay live on the YouTube channel. Which, if you don't already follow me, you should definitely be following the YouTube channel. This is our weekly live episode. I call it the Real Physician Reacts, Doctor Reacts. This week, this week is not even really topic driven this week. So this week titled Ask the Internist, right? So we're going to just be asking questions. May not notice it, but I am in the comfort of the physician room. I'm on nights this week, which means I'm taking care of any emergency. So if y'all see that I abruptly end this live, then like something's going down, right? So that's gonna be the likely scenario here. Again, make sure hit the likes, hit the follows, tap the hearts, share it out, because we're gonna talk about a wide range of topics. So again, we're not gonna be all focused on one topic versus the other. For those who catch the replay later, it will be posted on our YouTube channel tomorrow morning. So link in the bio, or I think one of the links goes directly to my YouTube channel. Make sure you subscribe to the YouTube channel as well, just in case they kick us off TikTok one way or the other. All right, so we're gonna have some questions. Okay, let's talk about. All right, so we already got our first question. We're gonna be talking about rheumatoid arthritis. Again, for those who may not know, I am a board certified internist. That means I specialize in the internal organs. That's kind of the way when one of my patients try to figure out, like, hey, what does it mean to be an internist? That means I specialize in the internal organs. Now, I don't specialize in a particular internal organs. I'm very general with it, right? So I know a little bit about a lot of systems. Hold on for a second. Get up here. Well, if we think we need one, just go ahead, because I mean they're not going to come tonight anyway. So, sure. All right, it's going to be the interesting question. And no one can straight cap them. No one knows how to. Okay. Yeah, sorry about that. Which will typically, this what happens when you're on nights. You get calls about the most random things that you get called for. So we have a person first mentioned talked about rheumatoid arthritis. So this is actually a very important topic, especially from the outpatient perspective. Rheumatoid arthritis is what I would like to say this disease of the body turning on itself. So it's a autoimmune process where the body will actually attack itself. And where does it typically attack itself? In the joints. So and this is typically kind of diagnosed usually in our early decades, teens, but usually 20s or 30s, because that's when we start noticing we having just kind of general aches and pain, especially within our hands, within our feet. But it's not only precluded to just the joints, because you can have certain organs, especially the kidneys, get affected as well. And the initial kind of treatment course typically is anti-inflammatories in one way or the other. But the way I kind of mentioned it, the fact that it's the body turning on itself, what typically occurs is that we typically have to give patients what we call monoclonal antibodies, which are essentially saying, hey, we want your body to stop attacking itself. And that could be good for a couple of reasons. Why? Because obviously your body stops doing it, but then it makes it more difficult to fight regular infections, right? So, and it's a chronic disease. It is a disease that can be well managed, can be well controlled, but it is a chronic disease of an issue that typically occurs. So let's see what we're, yes, I'm 44 have, yeah, so RA and OA. And those two kind of go hand in hand. When we talk about RA, rheumatoid arthritis, OA is the osteoarthritis. Typically, when we're talking about those two separate factors there, the RA is, hey, the body attacking itself is usually an autoimmune related issue, whereas osteoarthritis is usually what we hear more of the wear and tear. This typically happens to athletes, kids as well, but usually athletes, those who are just dealing with a lot of stress on the joints. And they're treated differently. Like your osteoarthritis, again, anti-inflammatories, rest, some pain control. Your RA is typically where you need to give yourself medications to try to protect itself from itself. What do you think about metformin for athlete? Yeah, typically the athletes, and that especially that combination as well. Metformin for RA. So I don't know of any. I'd have to look to see if there's any absolute studies that have some correlation where you may see some benefits of metformin with rheumatoid arthritis. We could take a quick little look here just see if anything pops up on PubMed. Okay. Yeah. So I see there's some clinical trials. This kind of data out of 2019 where it says that because of metformin antioxidant and anti-inflammatory properties, it could be a good candidate for RA, right? So again, what they're using the metformin for is saying, hey, we know that metformin could have good antioxidant, good anti-inflammatory qualities. Would this be beneficial? Now, of course, if you're a rheumatologist, your first line therapy isn't likely going to be, hey, let me put them on metformin. But metformin is a relatively safe medication, so it's not out of the ordinary from that standpoint there. Methotrexate. Yeah, methotrexate, most definitely. So, methotrexate makes way more sense too, because again, that is one of those medications that again stops the body from protecting itself. Hey, Millie, no, we're actually just starting. We're not even doing a very focused discussion topic today of our Thursday night thing. We're doing more of a kind of a general discussion, and our first topic was rheumatoid arthritis. And you may see, because like I said, I am on nights, so if you see me have to run out of here real quick, I will definitely hop right back on live to get the talking going. Hey, from Atlanta. Humira, I need to keep moving to eat well. Yeah, most definitely. And again, the problem with, and again, I don't want to say the problem. Let me make sure I clear myself. The issue with the treatment options for a disease process that attacks itself is that it's going to invariably leave you at a more compromised position to fight other things. So we have a lot of patients, especially when they come in the hospital setting and they're on like methotrexate, they're on Humira, they're on all these other monoclonal antibodies. We know that because they're on these medications, one, we have to stop those medications while we're treating them. And two, we know that because they're on those medications, they're at a higher risk for a disease process, right? Like we just know that in that sense. So it is one of those things where when you're talking with the rheumatologist, you have to, or usually your rheumatologist is the one who's taking care of it. You have to let them know kind of, I'm here for any buzz overhead. You do have to, try to see any of the pros and cons, and your rheumatologist will do a great job saying, "Hey, I have to put you on this medication. Yes, I know that you have a chance to succumb to other illnesses. And yes, I know that you have to be, because typically those patients who are on monoclonal antibodies, we make sure they're vaccinated if they can be vaccinated, because we know that the risk of getting those types of infections kind of increase through the roof. So it's definitely something to be concerned about for sure. Hello, everybody. All right. So while I got some free, yeah. So and that's the thing is because those types of medications, Humira, methotrexate, those types of medications, it doesn't know to only attack the body at the joints or only attack. It says, hey, you know what? The body is trying to attack itself, so I am going to I'm going to just like, hey, I'm going to depress the system and I'm going to knock everything out. And you're likely going to feel bad in the first place. And, obviously we're not infectious disease, but it's one of the reasons why when you're dealing with a fungal infection, it's so bad. Because the way, it's a blanket. It's like a blanket approach to kind of stop everything now. The way you have to deal with fungal infections is because your body doesn't necessarily say, hey, all right, I'm only going to attack the fungus but not attack everything else. You usually have to give especially if it's systemic type infection, you have to give an infection that can really knock everything out. So it's kind of that shotgun approach to try to treat the problem. But it is something, to be wary of for sure. Okay, so I got a quick little second. So we can definitely plug in because I always like to, every time I get a chance to kind of give us some updates on COVID, right? Shout out for those who don't know me, I like talking about COVID, I like talking about COVID vaccines and everything else. So what we've found out this week, FDA has given approval for a second booster for those who are immunocompromised or 65 and above. They are able to get a second booster of the covalent booster for COVID-19. Now, again, we are in the scenario where, yes, total the numbers are down, right? Which I've had discussions on this before. Take that information as you may. Numbers are down. Are we reporting less? Whatever, right? So we do see the numbers down. We do see the decline. But again, this, and I've talked about this on prior lives, this is actually the time window, typically towards the end of cold and flu season, that we've seen the numbers of our COVID cases and just kind of dip low. Now, what the concern is that there's already a variant that's outside the country now. I think it's XB. Let me not say the wrong synonym because I want to make sure we got the right. It is XBB.1.16, also known as Arcturus. That is it's a COVID variant out that we're seeing that could be of concern. Exactly 1.16 could be of concern. We know that it could be a little bit more transmissible than the other previous COVID variants. One thing that people are starting to notice that it can cause other symptoms, right? And for those, especially as long as we've been around, right, the COVID and just the disease itself, kind of the waves that it's gone through has kind of been in relation to kind of the symptoms. So we know the OG COVID, when it was first kind of around, the biggest issues it had was that it caused loss of taste, right? Loss of smell. Everything tasted funny. That was a big one for us. We know that as it progressed and as variants progressed, there is GI complaints that occurred, right? Like I'm having diarrhea, I'm having stomach issues, and that was the predominant kind of initial signs and symptoms. This one, they're mentioning that we need to actually look out for patients developing conjunctivitis or red eyes or watery eyes, right? So again, these types of things here, especially when we're dealing with COVID, especially when we're dealing with COVID variants, not only do we have to be aware of the variants, especially from a healthcare professional standpoint, but we also have to be aware of how they present. So now if I have a patient in the facility, because I work at several different facilities, I have a patient in several different facilities, they may not give me the typical, oh, I'm short of breath or I can't taste anything. But like, hey, my eyes are hurting, I'm getting swelling. They may have just very what we call atypical symptoms, but we have to have it in the back of my mind like, hey, I need to be wary about this COVID, right? So it's definitely something to, just to kind of keep in mind on. It looks like we're having a great discussion on, RA. Yes, about 7.2% of cases now, and we expect it to go up, right? Probably with with today is what, the 20th, in about 3 to 4 weeks, that number is going to go up because they all do. Now, of course, like when these numbers go up, when these variants come around, obviously our concern is not only do the numbers go up, but what happens when they go up? Is there more hospitalizations? Is there more deaths? Like what occurs when these typical variants go up? And again, we're thankfully running into a scenario where we have more people being vaccinated, more not necessarily boosted, but definitely being vaccinated. So we're having some lines of protection. Obviously, if you just open your eyes, you can see, masking isn't as prevalent as it was before, right? But we're hoping that, the people who aren't masking, a lot of them are boosted. A lot of them are protecting themselves, protecting others from the spread, right? Like that's all we can kind of hope for. And even in the hospital setting, like we actually just got an email today. We just got an email today that says, hey, you know what? Masks are optional in the hospital setting. Now, let me tell y'all, I'm walking into the hospital setting with a mask every single time. But that's just me. That's just me. I'm walking in the hospital with a mask every single time, despite whether you want to make me wear that mask. Now, thankfully, the mask will be readily available. And of course, if a patient has COVID or their family members go to visit them because they have COVID, they're still going to make them wear a mask. So that's, that's something, right? But I'm the ilk of, hey, you know what? I want to protect myself as much as possible, especially in these situations that I can. Like if I go to the grocery store, like I may run in, run out, not wear a mask, but if I'm going to a place that I know it's a petri dish of disease, I'm going to protect myself as much as possible. Like it just is what it is. But it was so funny, like literally today, and that's what happens, right? For those who may know, the COVID rules that the federal government put out there are ending in a few weeks. Like I think May 10th. I think someone put in the chat if you know what date they're ending. So the COVID, protections from a federal government standpoint, they're ending. So COVID things as far as the hospital setting, COVID things as far as insurance, COVID things as far as all of these like COVID related pandemic rules that they were placed are going away because. And in fact, I definitely have a YouTube video on it, but financing and everything else. So all of those things are going away. So this stuff has to kind of go. So we're going to have to, again, continue to deal with what I call the new norm, right? Like a lot of people, keep asking like, hey, when is COVID ending? COVID's never ending. COVID's never going away. So now it's like, how are you going to be able to maneuver in a world that COVID is still here? How are you going to be able to maneuver in a world that you're going to have these ebbs and flows of COVID flare-ups, right? Just like we have cold and flu season, like no one goes crazy when we have flu season. But like if I say, hey, it's COVID season, we should be just as prepared. So definitely a school of thought for sure. What's there? Yes, everyone. Yeah, a lot of people are like, I'm still wearing mine. It's actually a very good question. So someone asked, will you also treat the pink eye as well? Yeah. So for what we're seeing, because typically pink eye, for those of you know, or conjunctivitis, right, for a lot of people know, is typically viral mediated anyways. The majority of the time, if you have pink eye, it's likely due to a virus. And obviously I'm excluding, those who have allergies and everything else. But typically from an infection standpoint, virus is usually the main cause. So we may have to treat it symptomatically. Like we may obviously make sure your eyes are moisturized. If it gets real bad, we can give you some steroids. So we got some treatment options just for the conjunctivitis. But I think it's going to be very interesting, and I think it's going to be just a mindset shift that's going to have to occur for those who are like, oh, you just have pink eye, and not even think about like, oh, this might be COVID. Like that, because it's for a lot of people, when people hear COVID, they think all respiratory. They think, oh, it's just the breathing. But if the only symptoms they're saying is, hey, I can't taste, like I'm having this funny taste, boom, I got to think of COVID. Especially during a time with the Delta variant, GI issues were the biggest complaint. So a lot of diarrhea, a lot of upset stomach. So you have to think about that in that sense as well. So definitely now, especially, and obviously we'll see in the next few weeks, especially when this variant goes from 7% to 30%, 40%, we have to start thinking like, all right, we got a lot more people running around here with conjunctivitis. Do I need to be careful and not think about and think about COVID? So definitely something we need to be weary of for sure. Oh, this is a good question. Brittany asked, I had COVID a month ago. How long until my immunity goes away? Do you think? So that question varies depending on when you would have asked me on it. So if you would have asked me in the in the first kind of wave of COVID, dealing with the first kind of iteration of COVID. We know that those who got infected from COVID saw about a good 3 to 6 months of kind of a protection or cocoon where they still had antibodies against COVID. Now, that doesn't mean you couldn't get COVID again, but your antibodies were there. As subsequent, and again, this is the issue with variants. As subsequent variants occurred, that time frame just continued to move lower and lower and lower. And it got to the point where sometimes within a month to 2 months, your antibodies were essentially as if nothing happened. Which is why even for those patients who had gotten infected with COVID and maybe they never got the vaccine, we were saying, hey, you should wait a month and go ahead and get vaccinated or go ahead and get boosted. And so that was really just the big issue with these variants, because and every time a new variant comes out, the scientists and those much smarter than me have to kind of figure out, like, okay, how is this one going to affect all of the stuff that we knew about COVID before? So if you would have asked me about the OG COVID, I would say, yeah, you could probably rock out for about 6 months. Now again, even at that time, I used to still tell people, you should still get vaccinated. But you do have 6 months of what we see antibody-related protection, like your antibody levels are high. But with subsequent variants, with Delta, with the Omicron, BA.5, that time frame just kept moving to the point where just because you got naturally infected, right? And fortunately, you made it to the other side with no issues. Just because you got naturally infected didn't mean that like you were protected for a year. That just wasn't the case anymore. And that's when it really got to the point where before it was like, all right, naturally infected versus vaccine related protection, maybe. And then as these subsequent variants occurred, that number it just made way too much sense to get the vaccine, especially if you were looking for long-term protection. Now again, long-term protection is very relative, right? So you're going to still have people who will tell you like, oh, what's the point of getting the COVID vaccine if I got to get boosted, every 6 months or every year? Now, again, I don't think it'll be to the point where you'll have to get boosted every 6 months, because I don't think that the variants will, well, I'm hoping, right? And I thought would. I don't think that will have such significant variants that will be the case. But every year, I think is right in the wheelhouse. And for those who are on this slide right now, one of those benefits of having the federal government with those COVID protections that are ending next month is that, you could go to, these pharmacies and get free testing. You can go to these pharmacies and get free treatment. That's not going to happen. So we're gonna try to walk over to Walgreens in a couple of months, and they're gonna be like, the COVID test costs this. You're going to try to walk into Walgreens and get one of those over-the-counter treatment, and they're going to be like, this treatment costs this. So, especially if you have the opportunity to be able to, grab a couple home COVID tests, do that ASAP. I think they're still giving it away. So if you have the opportunity, do that ASAP, because once that government protection goes away, aka once the government checkbook goes away, it's going to be on your own. And then it's really going to be the haves, aka those who are properly insured. And I said properly because you could be insured and still not afford that stuff, versus those who aren't insured at all. Like it's going to be a tale of two worlds. So if you have not gotten vaccinated yet, get it while it's free. If you have not gotten boosted yet and you can, get it while it's free. Because once CVS and Walgreens and Walmart start saying, hey, this is the bill to get vaccinated, some people are going to be looking wild. Some people. I'm not saying everybody, but some people are going to be looking wild. Yes, I thank you, Melissa. It is May 11th. So I couldn't remember what date it is. So May 11th, that's the day. That is the day that you better be running. You better be running. And before that day, get vaccinated if you can. Try to get some home tests sent to your house if you can. Because once that day passes and the federal government is not going to send, the Walgreens of the world a check. I don't know how that works. But Once that goes away, people are going to be looking very wild. I'm just telling you. Like, don't believe me. Like I said, don't believe me. See, again, like, just think about it now. Right? For those who, let's say, if you wanted to get a flu shot, think about how much especially if you're not going to a place that's offering free flu shots. Think about how much it costs to get a flu shot. Something that we kind of take for granted because the flu shot's been around for so long. And if the flu shot medication has been around for as long as it did, and it's still costing people the money it's costing, imagine what a COVID vaccine that just came out 2.5 years ago was going to cost people. Again, I'm not trying to be hyperbolistic. I'm just trying to kind of educate our community and try to, save them some money. Let's see here. Let's see. Does pink eye mean it's being caught through the eyes? No, pink eye, that's actually a very good question. So the question was, does pink eye mean it's caught through the eyes? No, what happens is pink eye is essentially conjunctivitis. So essentially the whites of our eyes, which mine's kind of look red too, but don't pay no mind. I'm all night, so maybe it's lack of sleep. What happened is the whites of the eyes get inflamed, and we just kind of term it as pink eye, but the medical term is conjunctivitis. But it's not necessarily caught through the eye, but like for those who have, typical conjunctivitis, because we know how it's spread, what most people do when your eyes are inflamed, you rub it. You're rubbing it, and then you rub it in your hands. You don't wash your hands well. You go touch someone's face, and then boom. So it is very contagious. Now, I'm not saying that at least what we don't know right now, I don't know if the conjunctivitis you can pick up from COVID is contagious like that. We just know that from typical viral conjunctivitis, that's the typical picture. Well, no, it's not necessarily just pink eye. That's a great question, Brittany. It's not just pink eye with this new variant, but it is one of those a lot of these people are getting pink eye from it, because it's a new symptom that you didn't have to necessarily think about with the other strains. Like it wasn't one of the first symptoms you thought about when you said, "Oh, this person has pink eye." So that's kind of the case there. Yep, been around for 2 years. Throw away your antibiotics if you had them for that long. Please throw them away. Yeah, no, and I think this is probably a good point where we kind of mentioned by the time you were over one variant, the next one was moving and meaning little protection. Which again, and this is why when I talk to those who are anti-vaccinated, this is how you could tell they're very disingenuous, because if you explain to them like, hey, you know what, the COVID vaccine you got in the first time may not be as effective as the COVID vaccine you'll need in 6 months to a year, they'll tell you that, oh, see, it doesn't work. I told you that COVID vaccine doesn't work. That's why you should have never got it. Like, that's their mindset. But what they're not saying is the reason why it's not working is because we've had subsequent variants that made it, essentially not as effective as before. And part of the reason why we had subsequent variants was because people who were not vaccinated were spreading it out. They never say that part. That part never seems to come up, but it's this ingenuous argument that, oh, the vaccines don't work. That's why, the subsequent variants are, stronger than it. Like it just never made any sense. But again, that's what we've had to deal with for the past couple of years. So Texas, yeah, I think that's a good question. Good point. It says that they got Haley. Are they seeing pink eye and new COVID? Yeah. So the new variants. Now again, this is a new variant outside the country. Over here, it's not even a dominant variant yet. It's only about 7% of cases. But if you just listen to these words, in about 4 weeks, that number's probably gonna triple easily. Yeah, it'll easily triple. It just because that's just how variants do. Like for those, especially if you've been around these variant flows. Like, that's just typically how it does. We start looking at something, and it's like, ooh, in about a month, that's going to turn up. And it typically goes. And remember, we are in the part of, especially if you go to look back at the ebbs and flows of COVID and COVID cases, we are in the low. We are in the down slope. And, once we get to the summer, it kind of creeps back up again. So definitely something that, keep an eye of for sure. Oh, this is a good question. So someone asked advice for a soon-to-be IM attending. Yes, I love it. I love to hear this, right? So again, as an internist, one of the things that I had to learn, right, is that you are the captain of the ship, right? But more importantly, because you know so many things, and sometimes you can get you can get beside yourself, right? Because you know a lot, and understanding that this is a very team centered. This is a team effort, right? When it comes to just healthcare and healthcare in general, but you'll be surprised how many people defer to the internist, right? Because again, we're typically at the kind of the top of the food chain, especially when it comes to kind of medical care. We're usually the primary care physicians in the hospital or primary care physicians outside of the hospital. Surgeons usually need our medical expertise when dealing with their patients. So you are very heavily relied on. So understand, just being confident with your training, being confident with the fact that yes, you know what you're talking about, because that's probably the biggest test, especially if you're like a PGY3 about to go on to be an attending. That's usually like the biggest hurdle, because there's this confidence that like, am I ready for it? And I can assure you that you are, because there's a lot of attendings out here, right? Who, in fact, we won't disparage our fellow colleagues this live. We'll do it on a different live. Let's just say there are going to be a lot of colleagues out here who are going to wish they had your energy, wish they had your spark, wish they had your like wealth of knowledge that is downloaded in your brain, especially at a time like this where being an internist, we're so relied on so many different facets that I feel like sometimes we know too much. And some of our best traits is that we just like knowing stuff. We like reading, like we like being investigative reporters per se. It's a crazy trait of ours. Let's see. And this is a question, right? So why are hospitals not wearing masks, COVID units, and maskless? So what hospitals have always relied on is, and we kind of knew this was going to occur, like this aspect of like, hey, I'm just going to follow what the CDC tells me, and I'm going to base it off the CDC numbers. Like that's always been their crutch. So when the CDC was saying, hey, lock everything down, shut it down, mask, N95s, they're like, yeah, see, this is why we're doing it, because CDC tells us to do it. And we knew, right, especially in our field, that once the CDC started withdrawing and saying like, all right, we're going to be kind of relaxing a lot of our stipulations, that was only a matter of time that it would get to the hospitals. And then so now the hospitals had a way to follow up and say, hey, no, see, based off the CDC, this is why you don't have to wear no mask anymore. Or based off the CDC, this is why you don't have to do this, the things you have to do anymore. So, and and these hospitals, especially in that early pandemic when they were overran, they were just looking for guidance from anywhere, and the CDC was their, kind of pinnacle. And then, as vaccinations and as all these things started occurring, as far as the numbers, not being as reported as much, you just start seeing more and more people being lax. Do you think the parent vaccine could be available next year? Yes, I believe so, because I know Duke University is working on that. For those who may not be familiar with the parent vaccine, it's going to be a vaccine that is going to be against the SARS coronavirus family. So it's not necessarily going to be against one specific variant, because like right now, like the COVID booster it does well against, I think, Omicron, BA5, and like, so it has like a specific like, hey, I'm targeting this right here. What they're saying is like, hey, we need to make a vaccine that kind of just targets a lot of them, not anything one specific, because coronavirus is replicating, causing all these new variants. So that was kind of the mindset. So you'll see now, of course, a couple of factors as far as time is, we know that to come out with a new vaccine, you still got to go through all the steps, right? You still got to go through all of the preliminary stuff as far as clinical trials. Then you got to go to actual animal studies. Then you got to go through actual clinical trials, which means you're going to need people who are going to volunteer for said trials. And it's weird. It's weird, because let me tell you why. Because when COVID first hit, you had this disease that nobody knew nothing about, that affected a lot of people. So you had a lot of people, and then there was money there, right? Governments and everything else. So you had a lot of people who are very eager, right, to join these trials or to even perform these trials because the money was there. Fast forward now, where you don't necessarily have the whole world trying to fund, the outreach of a pan vaccine, because that's just not the case. Because they're like, hey, we got the vaccines here. Moderna's doing their thing, Pfizer's doing their thing, Novartis is doing their thing, and outside the world they're doing their thing. So you don't necessarily have that group effort providing dollars, providing like, hey, we'll give you all this money. We will, again, part of the COVID rules was that they allowed a lot of the red tape to be sped up. Now, they didn't skip any steps, and I hated that they called it Operation Warp Speed. It was a terrible name. Terrible name. All it did was erase a lot of the red tape that typically slows down the production of these medications or vaccines. So they eliminated a lot of the red tape. So, but of course, now that, again, May 11th, a lot of these things are kind of coming back. It may slow the progress down. So I would hope for next year. But again, I think some of that red tape, I think finding enough subjects may be an issue of concern. But it is a good possibility, right, to have a vaccine that kind of, again, especially when we talk about yearly vaccines, again, you wouldn't necessarily be getting a yearly vaccine that's specific to a variant, but you're getting, let's say, the yearly SARS corona pan vaccine that kind of protects me against the coronavirus in general. But very, very good question. Very good question, Blue Poodle. My mask saved me from TB exposure. I'm never taking it off. Oh yeah, I mean, see, what I like about, the reason why this question is a good one is because I think a lot of people equate the mask wearing to just COVID. Now, if you would have, rewind and been 2019, there were a lot of people wearing masks, but the reason why they were wearing masks because the flu season was out. So we used to wear masks all the time, right, for flu season. Or it made it worse, like especially if you were in a hospital setting, if you were a healthcare worker who didn't get the flu vaccine for whatever reason you get the flu vaccine, you were required to wear that mask all flu season. Like, hey, you don't get your flu vaccine because they have in fact mine is still here, so you probably can't see it, but I have this yellow sticker here that lets people know. I think this is either COVID or flu, but you would get something like this to say, hey, this person got vaccinated from flu, so I could walk around with no mask because the hospital knows that I got the flu vaccine. So before in 2019, if you didn't do that, you had to wear a mask. So wearing mask is there. And then again, I'm in South Florida. I take care of patients, with TB, right? Take care of quite, not a lot, but I taking care of patients with TB. And guess what mask we used to wear? N95s, right? And no one will sit here and be like, oh, go. I don't care if you have TB. You're allowed to, go out to the clubs. You're allowed to go out everywhere with no one will tell you that. They're lying if they will, right? But again, because it's COVID, they're like, I don't care if they got COVID. They can walk around. Like personal freedom. They tell you that type of BS, right? It just, it's just the comedy that we have to deal with that. Someone said, so, I'm vaccinated. Oh yes, 100%. I am. I'm on record. I am Moderna Mafia. Moderna Mafia. Like the second week when COVID vaccines first came out for healthcare professionals, boom. What's worse, I was on vacation the week it came out. I was so mad because I was on vacation, so I had to wait a whole week to get it. So and I've been Moderna Mafia because 2 doses, booster Moderna, second booster Moderna. So we are Moderna Mafia over here. Oh, this is a good question, right? So so someone's saying, who is paying you, right? Now, unfortunately, because I get this question a lot, unfortunately, no one is paying me, right? Pfizer isn't paying me, Moderna isn't paying me, Novartis isn't paying me, AstraZeneca, no one is paying me. Now, what I implore those who ask what I'm getting paid to promote vaccinations and everything else is please tell me how we can get paid. Because I got a lot of my healthcare professionals who go on YouTube, TikTok, Facebook, Clubhouse, and we've been promoting getting vaccinated for this whole time, and none of us seem to know how to get paid. So clearly it'd be something that y'all know. Like, and if y'all know, if y'all can, DM me please, so I can figure out how I can get Moderna. Because I'm Moderna Mafia. Shout out, hey, if someone from Moderna is watching, I would love to be your spokesperson, whatever that entails, to tell people to get vaccinated. I do it for free anyways. I would love to do it. Let's see here. Yeah, so and this is important too, right? So someone said, I'm vaxxed, I'm boosted, just got diagnosed with COVID yesterday, right? So this is the issue, and this is what happens when you're dealing with kind of subsequent variants after variants. That you can get vaxxed, you can get boosted, right? And still have that wiggle room of, hey, you know what? I may get COVID, but remember the goal of the COVID vaccine in general, and we've talked about this kind of in the past, but we haven't. Well, I might as well say it now. Remember, the two goals of the COVID is to reduce disease severity and make sure you don't pass away from COVID. That's the two goals from Pfizer, Moderna from the beginning. Like, hey, and I always forget about the OG Johnson & Johnson. Sorry about those who are Johnson & Johnson folks. So Johnson & Johnson is another one. So it's always been about decreasing disease severity and reducing mortality rate. Like, that's always been the goal of the COVID vaccine. Not necessarily to protect you from ever getting COVID. Now I know that was the messaging in the past, which was again just bad, which is terrible. It was just because it didn't make no sense. Especially when the people who made the vaccine never said that. It said, hey, yeah, you know what? You decrease your chance of possibly getting it, but we're not saying 100%, and they could never say that because it'd be crazy. So I'm just hoping that you're going to do well. Stay quarantined. I think it's 5 days now. Again, new CDC rules. 5 days now if you're afebrile. I think it goes up to 10 if you're still symptomatic to that point. So stay safe and keep your family safe as well too. Yeah, shout out to Millie. I love it. Quite outside now, folks. Globally caring and investing. Yeah, no, that's so true. This is a little good question here. So, thoughts on NPs in healthcare. So, I think the nurse practitioners, the physician assistants, are vital in healthcare. Now, do I think that they've gotten a bad rep from bad apples? Yeah, like I think that's been the case. When you look at historically what their goal and their kind of foundation of was really to help and support physicians and taking care of the community. And what's been happening, especially probably over the past maybe decade or so, is that's kind of switched, where it's not been necessarily in support of, but like, hey, I wanna just help the community. I want to stand over here. So you have different in the different state, different varies of autonomy, like what can a nurse practitioner do. We know nurse practitioners, we know physician assistants. One of the I guess the benefits, right, of them is that they can go from kind of specialty to specialty, right? So they can work for a cardiologist for 2 years, say, I don't want to do cardiology anymore. I'm gonna work in gastroenterology. I don't want to do that anymore. I'm work for. So they have the ability. Again, that's when you think about their origin, that was always their purpose, to be able to kind of, hey, plug in and kind of help. So what happens is you have, the bad apples, right? The bad apples who will make it seem like, oh my God, like going nurse practitioner is the only way to go. Don't trust the doctors. Don't, like, when you start having like infighting, right? That's what I call it. When you start having that infighting against team members, like, I think that's when it went downhill. And you just had more and more infighting occur, especially with the nurse practitioners, and when they're trying to get their autonomy. And you have people say like, "Oh, I would never go see a doctor." Like, there's people who are like, "I would never go see a doctor." And there are people who are like, "I would never see a nurse practitioner," and that just doesn't make any sense. One, because the numbers don't favor that. The numbers do not favor a world where you can only see one and not have to deal with the other. Like, it just doesn't make any sense whatsoever. Right, so it's just the infighting that I think unfortunately has kind of soured the relationship for some, right? Not all, for some, but I think they're extremely vital. I have like 3 nurse practitioners who work under me, right? So I'm at a long-term care center. I am at 2 rehabs. I'm at 2 long-term centers, 2 rehabs, and I do acute care medicine. And I have nurse practitioners or PAs in every different faction. Right? It's the way of the world. Like we're a team member here. But you know, again, the bad apples are unfortunately the bad apples. Let's see here. Make sure I don't miss anybody's question. But that was a very good question though. Shout out to my MPs. Let's see. Yeah. Oh, trust me. I wish the CDC had like a list of who was paying who. Any thoughts on the nasal vaccine? I'm not familiar with the nasal vaccine. Is it going to be nasal for COVID? Because you had some people who, because I know that was worked on in the beginning. I know that was a discussion in the beginning of trying to find a nasal vaccine, just kind of how like they have the nasal flu vaccine from that presentation there. Yeah. So Kelly says, I've always had the master of flu season at my job pre-2018. Yeah. So a lot of people, of course, obviously COVID is COVID, right? COVID has, you know, for a lot of people, COVID will be a turning point in their life. Like they're going to be like, pre-COVID, I used to do this. Post-COVID, I used to do that. Like that's going to happen for pretty much everyone who remembers and was adult or just kind of functioning, unless you're like a little kid, you don't even remember. But like even my kids, every day of their life, like my little daughter, she asked me like, "Is COVID gone yet? Is COVID gone yet?" And I gotta explain to her, "No, honey, COVID's not here." But because she remembers when she had to get boosted, when she had to get vaccinated, when there was no school, she remembers all that. So COVID's definitely gonna be one of those kind of benchmarks in kind of everyone's life. Let's see, really good comments. Oh yes. So this is a great question. This is a great question here. Let me make sure I highlight that. Key creatine. Do you feel like your MPH complements your osteopathic training? Oh, 100%, 1000%. One of the things that I love about my MPH is that it forced me to not think about the individual person. When you are kind of a medical professional, it's very easy, right? Like I'm taking care of Joe Blow in front of me. Let me just focus on Joe Blow in front of me. But the public health mindset is like, all right, you can't just focus on this one person. You got to focus on the community behind that one person. Like we used to joke about this in our public health classes, that in medicine, a successful trial in medicine is if it reduced mortality rate by like 10-15%. Like if you had a medication, you know, beta blockers, ACE inhibitors, like that reduced mortality rate by 10-20%, that was like a successful study and an amazing medication. In public health, our treatment modalities is, hey, I get people to wash their hands and I wipe out smallpox. Like that's the scale that public health puts on it. So I tell people all the time that my public health degree has made me such a better physician, because it just won't allow me to just focus on, like, you know, the person in front of me. More importantly, when I'm reading a lot of these journal articles, you know, Cleveland Clinic, everything else, you even read articles different as a public health professional. Like, because a lot of our classes, our goal necessarily wasn't to just read it. It was to say, all right, is this article trash? Like, that was the question we had. Is this a trash article? And I had to read it and be like, okay, it's not trash. This is why it's not trash. Because a lot of these articles, these journal peer review articles, be trash. So you go in that public health mindset, like, okay, this ain't a trash article, I can rock with this. So it definitely flipped the switch. And then obviously being osteopathic medicine, for those that know, I'm a DO, which means that, you know, obviously I did with my allopaths do with all the medicine, basic sciences, everything else. But we also have a focus on how, you know, the skeletal system can be manipulated and affected by diseases. Right, so if you have, let's say, a respiratory disease, I can look in your thoracic spine, you know, T1 to T7, and know that, you know what? Well, I'm feeling tissue texture changes here. You may have some respiratory issues develop, right? So it just gives you like just a different mindset, just a different way of processing and thinking, you know, for the process. But yeah, shout out to the public health degree. Shout out to the osteopathic medical degree as well. Let's see. Yeah. Oh, this is crazy. So a TB case. Shout out to the doctor. Definitely a good follow. If you don't already follow, TB case was reported and the patient rejected treatment and mask. Now, what's crazy is that guess what happens, right? When you got TB, right, and you were like, I don't want treatment, I want this. Guess who's coming to see you, right? The local government is coming to see you, right? The CDC is coming to see you, right? Because you are again, and it sounds crazy, especially in a time like this. You are putting people at danger. You are people at danger. They will come to your job. They say, "Oh, this is where that person work at? Okay, we'll go see them." Hey, you're supposed to get this vaccine treatment. What are you waiting for? If you're not waiting for it, you need to be they do not play for TB people just walking around. Now again, we don't treat COVID like that. We don't treat COVID like y'all. A lot of y'all better be lucky they don't. But that's how they treat it, because they recognize TB is a disease. Again, listen to this rationale. They recognize TB is a disease that even if I'm just around you, you can give me TB, right? And if you can give me TB, and then I can give someone else TB, and I can give someone else TB, what does that sound like? What disease does that sound like, that I don't even have to be interacting with you, but if I'm in the same room, I can pick up your disease and then pass it. That's COVID, right? But again, we don't treat COVID like we treat the TB folks, and for a lot of people, that's very lucky. I was concerned about the blood supply of vaccines. Oh, I'm not familiar with that aspect there. Someone's asking, what about all the cardiac deaths record numbers? So it's actually not. And I'm not sure if this is in relation to the COVID vaccine, but it's actually not. Record numbers of cardiac related cases, cardiac related deaths. Cardiac disease has been number one cause of death for as long as you can read back to see when we started tracking this thing. Cardiac diseases have been the number one cause of death. And more importantly, even if we wanted to kind of spurse out and say, all right, how many of these are COVID related? COVID disease causes an increased risk of cardiac death, not the vaccine, which again we've already proven ad nauseum. So again, which kind of leads to our point, you would want to try to prevent getting COVID, than dealing with the risk of all of the issues that can occur if you happen to get COVID. But definitely no association with COVID vaccine in that regards. Let's see. Yep, do no harm. Shout out to our oath. I like this. Pfizer come pay me. Finally, calling me interested to close. No, trust me. I keep asking, and every time someone accuses one of us out here for being paid, they never can tell you who else is being paid. They never can tell you how they're getting paid. And that's why I always ask. I'll ask you straight up, hey, if you know so and so is getting paid, just DM me. You don't even have to make it public. Let's say you're trying to keep it secret. You don't even have to make it public. Just DM me. Say, hey, this is so and so get paid. This is the person you need to contact, right? So again, if you're Moderna, if you're a part of the Moderna crew, and you want to start paying physicians, my DMs are definitely open. Let's see. Oh, this is a good question, right? So the question is, won't your body make antibodies fight against COVID without taking the jab? So the answer is yes. Yes, your body will definitely make antibodies if you have an infection, because that's what your body does. But what the issue is that, one, you have to get the infection, right? So you have to succumb to get the infection. And if you just do a search for long COVID, it's not that jackpot that oh, I just got COVID, I'm down the street next day. It's not that jackpot approach. So a lot of people will have that mindset oh, I'll just get COVID. I'll just get COVID, I'll just deal with COVID and I'm good to go. Usually they reference oh, the mortality rate being 1 to 2%. One, why would you even take that risk of being in the 1 to 2%? And two, when they talk about the 98% who don't die from COVID, right, there's a good percentage of people who get disabled from COVID. There's a good percentage of people who actually get disabled from COVID. So why would I even take the risk? Why would I even take the risk of even dealing with it if I don't have to, right? So that's usually the issue. So yes, your body will definitely make antibodies, but the problem is it'll make antibodies, but we already know that those antibodies not going to last long. Right? Again, it used to be 6 months to about a year. Now it's down to about 30 to 60 days. right? So that's usually the issue at hand when it comes to just the COVID body doing it, because we don't want to. I just always tell people let's not take the risk. Let's see. Where do I get the shot? Oh, so question. So why get the shot with various? Oh, this is good. So why get the shot with various viruses? Because there's still protection. So even if there are variants around, it's not to say that the new variants that are around isn't going to necessarily protect yourself against the one that the booster will protect yourself, because like again, we have this new variant, what we call it, a B1.16. We know that it's coming, but if you got the COVID booster right now, you're still protecting yourself from a lot of the variants that are circulating as we speak. Like that new variant only makes up less than 10%, which means 90% of cases are due to some of those variants that our boosters have. So that's why we still recommend getting vaccinated, and more importantly, getting boosted to protect yourself and have that wide range of protection. Now, again, when we fast forward and we have this pan vaccine, we'll be telling you, hey, go get the pan vaccine. But I still think Moderna and Pfizer and them are still going to be around, kind of doing their thing. Oh yeah. I mean, this is probably the most, and this is really the most important thing, right? We definitely, if we were reminding ourselves, and we remember when people were saying, hey, what was it, 70%? Like they kept mentioning herd immunity, 70%. The reason why is because we knew if we could have squashed it early, we wouldn't have to deal with the subsequent variants that we have to deal with at the rate. I'm not saying that we wouldn't have variants, because the way viruses stay alive is because they make a variants, and how they make variants by reproducing in people who aren't protected. So I'm not saying that it wouldn't have made variants. I'm just saying that you would have definitely slowed down the rate that it made said variants. So that's why we were trying to get so many people vaccinated in the initial onslaught, to not have to deal with wave after wave after wave, which is kind of what we're dealing now. But yeah, and again, when you tell people, especially those who are really against the vaccine, that's a concept they don't understand. They don't understand that the reason why we want so many people vaccinated is to try to slow that wave down. And now, if you look at it, right, especially, parts of this country, states in this country, a lot of people are around that 60, I think this country is about like 68% to 70%. So we're at that 70%. It just, unfortunately, took us 3 years to get there. Right, and because it took us 3 years to get there, again, you still have these variants. And again, that's just the United States. Remember, we don't have a fence around the United States. So yes, we may be close to 70% here in the United States, but there are other parts in the world that is not the case. And because that's not the case there, when a variant pops up over there, guess what? And y'all know we travel, y'all know we outside, it comes over here, and then we have to kind of deal with it. That time to do this, the resident asked me to check him out. Even about apples, including us. Oh yeah. Oh, 100%. 100. Oh yeah. This is a good part right there. Plastic surgery, have no time to do this. A resident asked me to check him out. Yeah. No, it's like I said. I think it's kind of in reference to our NP issue, right? We got, like I said, we got some. Right. It's not all dandies, right? Especially in our field, right? Again, I try. Oh, I take it back. I don't try to avoid talking to them, like talking about our colleagues, but sometimes you gotta talk about our colleagues, because sometimes they be wilding too, and I'd be like, what are y'all doing? Like you'll have, especially our colleagues who are like very opposed to, the NPs, the PAs, and those professions. Like they had opportunities to, build up the physician base. They had opportunities to secure and make sure physicians were in political power, but they didn't do it. They sat back, made all their money, right? And now they're upset that, part of making their money, right, means that, these other places got to flourish. And this is important too, right? Especially and this is so key, like, because you have a lot of people who are being taken care of by nurse practitioners, by physicians. Even though they go to a doctor's office, they have nurse practitioners, they have physician assistants kind of under them, kind of doing the work. So you have physicians who have kind of turned into this more of a managerial type role and kind of an overseer of the workers kind of working under them, which again I got a problem with in that regard, especially if you do a good job training them up. Let's see. So, and this is right. I think this is probably the biggest issue that I have with the nurse practitioner training in particular, is that it's a very, especially for those who are nurse practitioners, that it's a very, and those may not know, it's very inconsistent in their level of training, meaning that, like, for me to become an internist, I had to go through, obviously undergrad. I had to go through medical school. Then I had to go through 3 years of residency. I had to do all of these board exams. And even during residency, there was government bodies that said, hey, your rotation has to do this, and this. And the nurse practitioner level of training, you may have a nurse practitioner, and just because I know, who, like, all right, I just need to get this. I'll go around with this family physician for a month, and I'll go around with this other OB physician for another month, and I'll go. So, like, it's not, and again, it's not their fault. They're just kind of the way their system is set up now, that it's not very streamlined. So there isn't a nurse practitioner residency for those who want to do outpatient medicine, or a nurse practitioner residency for those who want to do, surgery or everything else. Like, it's very like, all right, hey, you need to have 1 month for OB, 1 month for this. And a lot of times the schools are saying, hey, you need to go find these rotations. And again, so the level of teaching is inconsistent. So, and again, as long as they pass their end boards, it's just like, okay. So I think that's the biggest issue I have, especially a lot of my colleagues have, is that that training is different. Like for a PA training is way more rigid, like PA school, and then I think their exam is called the PANTS exam, which is funny, to become certified in a physician assistant. Whereas the NPs, for some places it could be the Wild Wild West. I'm in Florida, and for those who may not know, Florida just recently had controversy with these schools, with the fake diplomas and everything else. And for those who know and heard me talk, that would happen in Florida, because that's a very Florida thing to do. But some of those nurse practitioners who got the fake diplomas ended up becoming NPs, right? So, and again, that's what happens when you don't necessarily have the kind of checks and balances that you do. But again, like I said, we still shout out to our NPs. We love them. Can internists be a primary care provider? Oh yeah, most definitely. A lot of internal internists who, after they finish residency, and there's like a 2-track for them. They either go into kind of acute hospitalist-related medicine, or they go into ambulatory outpatient medicine, and there are a lot of providers. Because typically when we think about primary care provider, it's either a family medicine physician, a pediatrician, or the internist, and then they kind of serve as the de facto, person of ease. Sure. Oh, Millie's like, I'm just blocking them. I love it. Oh, this is a good question. So the difference between family medicine and internal medicine. So I love saying this because I talk about this all the time. So as an internist, part of my training, more importantly, what my training did not include, like when you're a family medicine physician, not only do you have to do 3 years of training, usually 3 years of training, but you have a focus on internal medicine, which is, adult medicine, which is, 18 above, but you also have a focus on kids, right? Because you're a family medicine physician. So you got it from babies all the way to the elderly. That's your bread and butter. That's why I commend my family physicians, because I think they are wild, because you got to know about the whole spectrum. Versus me, I got off easy. I'm an internal medicine physician, so I only have to focus on 18 and till they die, right? Like, that's what I focus on. Now, in some of the training, especially for internal medicine physician during our residency, a lot of it is more hospital focused, more hospital based, versus the family physician. They tend to do a lot more rotations on the ambulatory setting, but that's usually the big difference. But shout out to the FPs, because I don't know how they do it. I don't know how they do it. Yep, over here to answer that question about what do we need to do as a country to say COVID is no longer concerned? This is a good question, right? Shout out to everyone. I think everyone's family lives. I appreciate you. What do we need to do as a country to say COVID is no longer concerned? So when we say, one, we have to define what do we mean by no longer a concern. Is COVID ever going to cause government shutdown? Nope. Is COVID ever going to cause us to have to universally wear masks and those things? Nope. Right. So for a lot of people, we are already at the point of COVID is no longer a concern. The way I think about it is like the flu. The flu is something that I stay concerned about, but the majority of the public don't really sweat the flu like I sweat the flu. Like if you see me if you Google me past 2020, I got a lot of videos like this saying people go get your flu shot. So I've always been the shot pusher, I guess. Like, and again, the people who make flu shot don't pay me either, right? But I've always been that. So there's a public sentiment when we talk about no longer. So I think it's really about the definition. Like when you say COVID is no longer a concern, you're not going to see a worldwide shutdown. You're not going to see lockdowns, social distance, man. You're not going to see none of that stuff no more. So we are already over that significant wave. Why is that the case? Because we have vaccines now. We have multiple vaccines now. We have multiple different companies making vaccines. We have outpatient treatment options, even though some of these variants are making those kind of look a little weak. We have a better structure, hopefully, to deal with any influx of COVID, because that was a big issue too. Not only that we couldn't deal with COVID because we didn't know what COVID was, but the hospital settings literally could not deal with the influx of cases. Like there was a point in my hospital that we shut down the surgeries, right? So you were having no surgeries, and in the areas that you had surgeries, we had to move patients down there. Like we had whole floors dedicated to COVID. Like it just overran us. So I think we have more and more. You might have to pin that again because I missed it. So we had more and more of an emergency because we could not handle it. So if you say, "Hey doc, is COVID no longer a concern?" From the general public, no, I don't think it's a concern, especially here in the United States. Now, of course, there's individuals, there are group people who are still be affected, people who still need to be protected by themselves, and you're going to have to move around those, but I think you still kind of have to move around those when you were dealing with the flu. It's just that we didn't give the flu the credence that we've given COVID. So I hope that answers your question, because it's a very good question, because it's a question we've been getting past for the past couple of years. Like, when is this over? And I don't think it's ever going to be over. I think it's going to be here to stay. It's just going to be like from a public sentiment and an individual sentiment. Like, what are we going to do about it? But yeah, definitely a very good question. I definitely recommend getting an MPH degree. It will definitely make you think of medicine and just health in general. And I got a lot of people who went and got their MPH degree, and they're epidemiologists, and they're looking at numbers, and they do some amazing things with just a public health degree. I got a master's. When I got my master's thesis, it was in program evaluation. So it's one of the reasons why I can go pretty much anywhere and like be able to assess like how people are doing things and tell them that they're doing it not great. Clean air. Great. This is a great point. Clean air, mask etiquette, especially in crowded areas, because COVID will always be around. That's the thing too. I think we have to. I think you pinned this, but I'll just repin it again, because COVID is always going to be here, because of that. And again, obviously it's a mindset thing, because like I said, a lot of y'all are going to be like, oh my God, I remember before COVID, I used to be able to do this. And after COVID, I do this, right? After COVID, I hesitate to do this. After COVID, I hesitate to do that. Like a lot of people are going to, like, that is really going to be a mindset shift for a lot of people that's really never going to go back. It's really never going to go back in that case there. Any advice for high school junior planning on going to school for pre-med? Oh, yes. So one, especially because pre-med is such a very, broad term. So typically pre-med has a lot of science related courses in it. One, make sure you like science, make sure you like math, because you're going to get a lot of it. But more importantly, especially when you talk about going from high school and even going to undergrad, making sure you're getting into a specialty that you, especially a degree program that you actually like doing, that you'll actually enjoy. Because again, yes, there'll be some prerequisite courses that you'll need to apply for medical school. But if you really want to do, let's say, anthropology, if you really love anthropology, you're going to have a much better time going through your anthropology degree and then every now and then taking your required courses for medical school than going into like a pre-med program and hating biology. Like, I'm gonna be a bio major because all the same courses I need for bio major I can go to for med school. So I would say, one, do something you love doing, especially when we're talking about the undergrad stuff. But when you're in that high school realm, obviously have fun, volunteer, right? Especially if you have the opportunity, because I know not everybody has the opportunity. If you have the opportunity to be able to volunteer in certain places, volunteer with doctors' offices, hospitals, EMTs. I know that's usually an easier one to volunteer with, like the fire department, just so you can kind of get, your hands. Not your hands won't get dirty, but just so you can kind of see, like, okay, let me see what's happening on this medical field, because you want to kind of see, especially when you say, I want to go be pre-med, you're essentially saying, hey, about 10 years of my life, like, I'm going to just dedicate to this. It ain't going to even be about working. I'm going to be just dedicating to the pursuit to get to right here, right? And you just got to be okay with, like, hey, I'm about to lose 10 years of my life studying in residency, in school, all this. Like, let me make sure I like what the other side looks like. So definitely your junior, your senior year, going in and diving into, or just getting sneak peeks of some of the stuff that you may want to go into is extremely important. Do I think kids should still wear masks at school? I think what happens, like, if now, are these kids vaccinated, not vaccinated, right? That's probably gonna be the number question, right? If your kids are vaccinated, rock out. Like, I think we know that the protection is there if you provide the protection. If your kids aren't vaccinated and they don't wear a mask, that's just a risk they have to take. But again, the same risk that they'd have to take if they were going and you didn't wear a mask and they had the flu, right? Because the flu was still there, right? Colds is still there. Anyone who have kids know that these kids touch everything, right? Kids don't have that mental like, oh, let me not touch that. Like, kids touch everything, they get sick. Everyone's sick, their friends are sick, they still hugging, and they want to hug you, especially when they get sick. So it's just a matter. I think from a masking standpoint, one, if you have a kid who's compliant, right, to wear the mask, okay, and they like it, because a lot of kids my kids like wearing masks. Like, we got to tell them, all right, you don't got to wear a mask for that. So my kids like, because they got so used to, because we got the Disney mask and Batman and Superman and Spider. We got all these, like, so for them it's a status symbol to them, and that's what we have to think. A lot of times from an adult perspective, like, we think like, oh man, they're frustrated, they can't see. Nah, these kids be having fun wearing masks, right? So, like, if you make it fun for them, then rock. But if they don't want to do it, like, if they hate doing it, they ain't gonna do it anyways. Like, it's like, and I'm always on, like, all right, how can I make my patient as compliant as possible? If I know they hate wearing masks, I gotta do other things to try to protect them, because they won't wear the mask even if I give it to them. So that's a oh my. This someone in Washington State who's refusing TB treatment and now running from the cops. Yeah, no, this, like, yeah, and I don't, because obviously TB hasn't been a thing for like 4 decades or something, right? Like, as far as like a big thing, because I'm in South Florida, so we had like a TB center, like a facility that all the TB people went to, right? That's like 70s, 80s type stuff. So again, yeah, like if we treated COVID, especially those who don't get vaccinated, if we, like, let's say you pop positive, right? You pop positive, and again, the scenario, you pop positive for COVID, and your doctor says, hey, you're positive for COVID, you need to come get treatment. And you're like, nah, doc, I'm okay. Like, oh, you're okay? And then I hang up the phone, I call the CDC, hey, Barry over here say he's not going to get treated for this COVID. And then the CDC says, oh, okay, we'll take care of that. They call the local police department, they go to your job, right? They find you here, they find you there, and say, hey, you need to come with us. If you don't want to get vaccinated for COVID, you need to be in this barracks, right? Again, I'm hyperbolizing it. You need to be in this barracks for 10 days, right? Like, if we were doing that, like, that'd be a whole nother beast in and of itself. But yeah, people don't realize the TB don't play. Let's see, yeah. And COVID, yeah, this is I know I mentioned this before, but COVID causes way more issues than the vaccine, right? And we've shown that over and over and over again, but somehow they only want to just focus on like what the vaccine does, especially when I think it was with Pfizer and that concern for incidence of myocarditis. And then now they're like, oh my God, see the myocarditis, I tell you, even though the rate of myocarditis in the general public was the same as the rate of myocarditis in patients who got the COVID vaccine, right? Never that was never put together, but the folks ran with it. Oh yes. Oh yeah. So why do all doctors clown ER physicians? So I don't think they do. I think what you'll see, because I'm a hospitalist, right? So I work directly, because usually if the ER doctor needs to admit someone, guess who they call? They call it a hospitalist. It's a very love-hate relationship. Like imagine, right? If you had a specialty that every time they called you, they were giving you work. Like every time they called you, they were giving you work. So when that ER physician calls that orthopedic surgeon, hey, I got a broken hip, come fix it. Hey, I got a brain bleed, come fix it. Hey, I got a patient who needs to be admitted, come fix it. Hey, I got this woman pregnant. Like, so imagine the specialty that whenever you hear from them, they're giving you some work to do. And your goal is to say, man, I don't think I need to do that work. Like that's the ER specialty in a nutshell. But they're amazing physicians. But like that's some of the disdain that you hear, because again, just like the internist knows a lot about a lot, the ER physician knows a lot about a lot in the emergency setting, and they have to be able to kind of stabilize so they can call that orthopedic surgeon, that neurosurgeon, that thoracic surgeon, that general surgeon. Hey, you got this gallbladder needs to be taken out. Hey, you need this person. Like, so that's the angst that you typically get in the ER physician standpoint, is because every time they call, they're giving us work to do. Let's see. Miss Bernice is here. Shout out Miss Bernice. Miss Bernice is one of my we've been rocking together for I think about a year now. Miss Bernice, she doesn't like the vaccine. She doesn't like, and she doesn't like when I call her anti-vax, but she kind of follows a lot of stuff the anti-vax folks do. Shout out to Miss Bernice. Who is this like? This is funny. Who do I dislike the most? Surgeons, cardiologists, or ER physicians? So again, I think this kind of plays factor to it. If I was forced to choose a specialty to rank the least, if I was forced to, like they twisted my hand, it would be the ER physicians. Because again, anytime you hear from the ER physician, it's, hey man, this patient here got to be admitted. And of course, I'm on the other side. Does this patient really need to be admitted? Like, can't you just do something to send that patient home? Because again, and remember, especially when I was a resident, anytime you heard the ER physician, hey, I got this admission. Hey, I got this admission. Hey, I got this admission. So like reflexively in your mind, almost like PTSD, anytime you hear from the ER physicians, you know that, they're about to give me so much more work to do, and I didn't really want to do that work. So that's typically, if I had to rank. Shout out to my ER physicians, but I love y'all. But like, if I had to rank, if they twisted my hand, if the hand was twisted and I had to choose one, get him out of there. Let's see. Make sure we don't miss any. This is very good. This is actually a very good question here. So this is thoughts on weight loss surgery. So the times have changed so much in regards to weight loss, obesity, and everything else. There was a time, let's say, about 10, 15 years ago, where like it was almost like taboo to even discuss having surgery to lose weight, right? When we talk about bariatric related procedures, lap bands, gastrectomies, like it was like shunned. But then, right, because what we typically, especially in the medicine standpoint, we started looking at the numbers, right? We started doing the studies and say that, hey, you know what? And again, the people with money, the insurance companies, they're like, hey, you know what? It would actually be much cheaper for us just to get the surgery. Because if we give them the surgery, now guess what? Their diabetes is better controlled. Their hypertension is better controlled. All these things are better controlled, which means they cost less on our system, which means they cost less to us. So like we were spending all of this money just trying to tell them to exercise and eat better, when we could have just sent them straight to go get the surgery, and that would have saved us so much money in the long run. So you definitely see this kind of pendulum switch when it comes to kind of weight loss surgery and where it's ranked as far as recommendations. Before, it used to be like, try this, try this, try this, try this. Okay, you can think about weight loss surgery. But I think as the surgeons got better at doing the weight loss surgery and their complications, decreased, and just the results were just fantastic, then you start seeing it kind of rise to the top as far as surgery is concerned. All right, we got about 1 more minute. So we got about, let me see if I can get one more question on here before I get up out of here. No, I appreciate these questions though. Let's see here. Oh, let me talk. So this is a good, right? So someone said Fly FM is almost interchangeable with IM now, unless you live in a flyover state these days. The reason why I would separate that, because like I said, you do not want me to take care of anyone below 18. I get stage fright. Like, I used to take care of patients outpatient medicine. They'd be like, "Oh, can you see my kid?" I'm like, "How's your kid?" Like 16. I'm like, "Oh no, I don't know what 16-year-olds do." Right? Like, we as an internist, we literally do not see a person under 18. Right? And our women's health was one rotation, whereas family medicine much more. So when I tell you, like, it's definitely a stark. It's definitely a difference over there. And again, that's why I commend my FPs, my family medicine folks, because I know I couldn't do it. Let's see. And so we'll take this last one, and then we'll definitely have to hop on tomorrow for another series. Now, this episode we will definitely, because I usually only post one of my episodes to YouTube. I'll post this one, but we'll definitely hop on tomorrow because y'all had a lot of great questions. How do you feel about pain management? Extremely, extremely, extremely valuable. I think historically, a lot of people don't realize what our system, healthcare, right? Because healthcare, remember, I'm Black, right? So I have a love-hate relationship with healthcare system, right? Because of just how the history of medicine has transpired, and racism and everything else. But right, when it comes to pain issues, there was a time where I could open up shop and charge everyone $200 cash, and then they go around the corner and they pick up 100 pills of Percocet, oxycodone, whatever. And it wasn't until they noticed that, all right, you know what? The medicine field is making a lot of drug addicts, that they shut all of that down almost overnight. And this happened, in Florida, this happened between 2008 to 2011, somewhere around that time frame. I know because I was out in rotations. And what happened almost immediately is that we had so many, drug withdrawal people get admitted. So many drug overdose people get admitted because now the medication that medicine had been feeding them, to feed their craze for financial reasons, they couldn't get to no more. So either they had to score some Percocet somewhere else, or score that next level opioid, which is heroin, from somewhere else, right? So like you had a lot of drug overdoses, a lot of drug withdrawals, all because of medicine. To the point now, when you fast forward in the year 2023, you have patients who will not take a opioid medication for fear that, I don't want to get addicted. So you have a patient will break a leg and be like, "No, I don't want to get addicted." I'm like, "Sir, you just broke your leg. Like, I promise you, I'm not going to make you get addicted." So we have unfortunately ingrained in our patients, one, that pain is bad, that pain is taboo. To manage your pain is something that you have to kind of whisper, because if you say it out loud, like, people don't want to deal with you. And then again, you have so many disease processes. I think the more common one I always think about, especially in my culture, is sickle cell disease, right? So you have patients who are in over pain, and then you have professionals, like healthcare professionals, who are like, "You're not in that much pain. You're a seeker. You're this, you're that." So then they under-medicate them, under-treat them for fear of being one of the doctors who put a person on a career path to be dependent on pain medication. So it's and that's why I love the fact that you have specialties now that specifically focus just on pain management, because it's so extremely, extremely important, right? So again, that's the last question, right? man, I love y'all guys. Thank you for coming out to another episode. Again, this was our Real Physician Reacts, but we just did a kind of a free open series, and y'all had a lot of great questions. I gotta go see a couple patients because they called me earlier and I ain't never go. So I'm gonna go see a couple patients. This episode will be on the YouTube page tomorrow, and I'm gonna see you guys tomorrow night because I'm on nights this whole week. So we'll do another round tomorrow night. Y'all be blessed.